What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And due to popular request, or due to my recent poll getting 93% of people voting for a video on Jedi Fallen Order, I decided that I would make a video on the game. Now, Jedi Fallen Order is a game that came out in, I believe, late 2019, so I will probably kind of spoil things or give away certain elements of the story. It's been out for a while, and I'm sure a lot of you know kind of the general aspects of the game that are spoilery, like the plot and the certain twists and character appearances and so on. So I'm just gonna kind of not really hold back. If you haven't played the game and you don't want to get spoiled, I guess don't watch this, but I mean, it's been like 2 years, so yeah. So I got the new PS4 for my Christmas, or for Christmas. You would have seen that in my Christmas haul like a couple months ago, obviously, at Christmas. And I also got Jedi Fallen Order as well, which is a game that I'd heard a lot of good things about, and I'd seen some videos on it and so on. So I eventually played it after playing like all the Lego games, and like, if you didn't know, I'm not like a super video game savvy person. I don't really play a lot of video games. I'm not like the most experienced video game player. I really love Lego games, and I'm really good at Lego games because I've played like a majority of them, and I like playing them, and therefore, you know, just once you play a lot of them, you get experienced, and they aren't necessarily that difficult compared to some other games. But Jedi Fallen Order was the first time I was really stepping outside of my comfort zone in terms of like my type of gaming, and it took a little while to get used to. I wasn't used to it at first. It was rather strange. I found the controls to be a little bit weird, although certain controls are very similar, like square on the PS4 is still the attack button, similar to the Lego games, and the X button, it means jump like the Lego games. So a lot of the controls are similar, but I eventually got used to it. I got pretty used to it throughout the game, and you know, the game is really well made. Like, visually, it looks very, like, pleasing. It's a visually impressive game, and, like, with certain games, like the old Harry Potter video games, like, my siblings used to have the old Harry Potter Order of the Phoenix game, and I tried playing that game, but I really couldn't play it, not just because it's, like, confusing in terms of how you actually progress the story in that game, but it's also really bad looking. Like, I can't even look at that game. It just looks really bad. But when you look at Jedi Fallen Order, it's a very visually pleasing game. It's very impressive. Like, certain parts of it, like cutscenes, they look like they could be out of like a movie. And like, even when you kind of like zoom the camera in on the protagonist, Cal Kestis, at random points when you're just playing the game, it's really uncanny how, like, realistic he looks. Like, his character model looks very realistic, and that's because I believe Cameron Monaghan did do the motion capture work for Cal Kestis for the game. So, he's very realistic looking, like, character in the game. And all the characters, honestly, do look pretty good. Like, there's certain characters where they're, like, aliens and stuff, and you can't really do motion capture work for an alien in a video game, if that makes sense. So there's like a certain level of realism that's lost there, but like all the human characters and stuff, they look pretty good. I've seen a lot of memes and people poking fun at the fact that the kind of Jedi Master character, Seer, her eyes are always like bugging out of her head, like her eyes are really big, which, I mean, is kind of true, and it's kind of funny to poke fun at that. But like, honestly, the game visually is very impressive, and just like, I'm not like the most experienced, once again, like video game player or anything like that, but I found the gameplay very intuitive and very fun. There's a lot of like fun, like puzzling areas where you have to like freeze something with the Force or push something with the Force, and then while it's frozen in place, you have to jump across it before that like thing becomes unfrozen with the Force. And there's a lot of cool combat sections. There are a lot of enemies that you bump into, like these Purge Troopers, which is a concept that I don't believe had been introduced before this game, at least in canon. And it's just like, they're like actually some real formidable characters, which are really cool to fight. And then there are also kind of these cool special moves that Cal pulls off in fights if you like kind of weaken an enemy to a certain point, and then you have like these really cool moves that he does. And it's just like, you know, it's just very like satisfying when you're when you pull off of a certain move on a character and you defeat them, and it's very satisfying to kind of finish the fights in that regard. And then also just the story overall is very interesting and is able to tackle some certain concepts with a lot more gravitas than some other Star Wars forms of media recently. Mainly, I'd say Star Wars Rebels. This game, to me at least, had a lot of similarities, or bears a lot of similarities to Star Wars Rebels in, well, just the fact that the main antagonists are the Inquisitors, which are kind of the main antagonists of the first 2 seasons of Rebels. So there's that aspect to it, as well as that you have kind of the Inquisitors, which are a concept that we had seen before, and it was briefly alluded to in Rebels when you had the Grand Inquisitor, voiced by Jason Isaacs in the first season, and in Season 2, you have the moment with Kanan in kind of the Force Temple on Lothal, and he interacts with a Jedi Temple Guard who is revealed to be the Grand Inquisitor before he turned to the dark side. So it's kind of revealed there that that Inquisitor was in fact a Jedi, and that maybe a majority of the Inquisitors were former Jedi. But in this game, you get to see in excruciating detail the process that these Jedis went through, or that these Jedi went through, like being tortured and etc. You know, the process that went from Jedi to being transformed into the Inquisitors. And just very interesting stuff. You get, like, the main antagonist, I'd say, is Trilla Sudari, or the second sister, who was the former Padawan of Sir Junda, the kind of master character. And there's a whole, like, kind of, like, deep history going on there, and it can be rather emotional, but it's also very investing. And Cal Kestis is also a very investing character. He bears, to me at least, a lot of similarities to Kanan Jarrus. You know, his master was killed during Order 66. He runs away, and he's a character that isn't entirely sure of himself. The thing about Kanan in Rebels was that he's kind of technically, because he has Ezra as his Padawan, he's technically a Jedi Master. But in other Star Wars media, when you have, you know, Obi-Wan, Yoda, like in the original trilogy, they were always portrayed as being very knowledgeable, wise, and sure of themselves. But with Kanan in Star Wars Rebels, he was a very unsure character, very insecure about himself and his abilities. He always questioned if he was sending Ezra on the right path. And in this game, Cal Kestis is basically a version of Kanan, but he's not a master. He's not a very skilled Jedi. He never completed his training, so he's kind of inexperienced in a way. So that's why a lot of the enemies in the game actually pose a threat to you, because you aren't the most experienced Jedi, and you actually get to play through the story of Cal, and as you build up your certain, like, Force abilities and other skills throughout the game, and you learn new Force abilities, you know, as the game progresses, you learn, and kind of through kind of you're able to apply certain lessons that were taught to you in the past when you were a Padawan and apply them to the current story at hand. It's just a very interesting aspect of the story, and it blends well with the gameplay, because you want to have introduce new abilities into the game that your character can use, but then they do it in an interesting way where it's abilities that he learned as a Padawan that he's now applying, and he's kind of in a way able to complete his training. And there's also an interesting story with him and his master, who he feels he failed, and he feels like he let him die during Order 66. And there's a very interesting story being told there. There's also just a lot of interesting aspects to the game that I like about kind of discovering these little Force echoes and little tidbits, little pieces of information that are scattered throughout the world. Mainly Zepho is a very interesting planet inside of the game where you learn about this species known as the Zepho that had not been, as far as I understand, not ever been referenced in Star Wars before this. And there's just a lot of interesting hints about kind of these sages of the Zepho, and they were just kind of obsessed and, like, with power, and then they kind of committed genocide. It's a very kind of interesting story that you learn about as you go to different planets. There's Bogano and Zepho, and then there's also a tomb on Dathomir, and you kind of learn a lot of interesting tidbits about, you know, the Zepho and kind of this very dark, you know, history of this species, and it's very interesting to learn about. There's also just a lot of other interesting elements of the story. They tie in the Night Sisters and Dathomir into the story in a very engaging way, where there's this one surviving Night Sister who believes that the Jedi were the ones who killed her people, because from her perspective, she just saw General Grievous from the Clone Wars when she was a child with the Jedi lightsabers murdering her sisters. So she was told by this kind of mysterious Night Brother character, or this leader of the Night Brothers. There's this character that it's alluded to that the Night Brothers follow, and then throughout the game you discover that it's actually this fallen Jedi Master, Taron Malicos, and he ends up kind of becoming an enemy that you have to duel at some point in the game, or at one point in the game, and just very interesting aspect there. They tied in a lot of elements of kind of the Star Wars narrative. You see Saw Gerrera and his group on Kashyyyk, and, you know, they just tie in a lot of elements of the ongoing Star Wars narrative that we're aware of, but also is able to tell its own story in a very interesting way. Like, all these new characters I found very investing, and I enjoyed their presence. Even little characters like Grease, this kind of four-armed monkey character who I believe that this is the same species as the Jon Favreau voiced character from Solo: A Star Wars Story. He's just kind of a fun little quirky character there who puts on a gruff, like, exterior, has a gruff exterior, but you can tell he does care about Cal and Seer, and he also, there's kind of this subplot in the game where you have to collect seeds for him to put in his little hiberniculum, and it's just kind of a cute little character trait that he's kind of this grumpy old guy, but he just likes plants. Like, there's just a lot of cute little elements to the story that I enjoyed, and it keeps it just being enjoyable, like, as a story to play through. And it's just like an engaging Star Wars narrative, because you aren't just watching it, you're playing through it, and you're experiencing the story, like, through the character Cal. And it's just very fun to play, just very investing story, very fun, and it does kind of follow a formula that is somewhat familiar to me from the Lego video games, because even after you finish the main story, like, narrative, there's still a lot of areas that you are yet to explore. Like, there's this whole area of, like, a crashed Venator on Zepho that I had no idea about until after I completed the story. There's even these little kind of battle arenas that you can make, like a battle grid, and you can choose out of all the enemies you fought throughout the game which ones you want to fight in these little battle arenas, and there are battle challenges which I really enjoy playing through. Even now, I've completed I've gotten all of the secrets and chests and all the little things, but it does, you know, kind of follow a similar formula to the Lego games in that way, where even once you complete the main story objective in a Lego game, you still have free play mode where you can go around and get all the little collectibles and stuff, and Jedi Fallen Order greatly reminds me of that, so it was able to kind of keep me invested in that way, where it still followed a similar formula to the Lego games, where I was like, okay, I can still kind of enjoy it in that regard. But they're just even these extra things, like I said, like the battle arenas and battle challenges, which I really enjoy, because the combat was one of my favorite parts of the game, and just kind of actually defeating enemies and pulling off special moves and stuff is really fun and, like, entertaining to play. You know, it's a game that has a lot of replay value. I feel like there's, like, once you finish the main story, once again, you can go back to all the worlds and explore the planets, and it's fun. It's not like the type of game where once you go back and you have to go back to the planets and explore them further, it feels boring, like, where you're like, okay, like, even some of the newer Lego games, it kind of feels like, oh, we're just going through the motions, we gotta get all the collectibles to get to 100%. But with this game, it didn't feel like boring in any way, because when you go back to these planets, there are little areas that you didn't know about that you discover, and little secrets and tidbits about kind of, once again, the history of, like, the Zepho and all these little subplots that have, like, kind of history. Like, there's even some kind of Jedi Padawan thing that happened on Zepho with the crashed Venator during Order 66. And even the voice actor who voiced the clones, D. Bradley Baker, comes back to voice kind of flashback scenes with the clones, or like little audio bites, and it just kind of makes the whole Star Wars story feel more cohesive, where it's like, okay, so it is all part of the same universe. You got D. Bradley Baker voicing the clones here, and it just kind of pulls it all together. Like, it feels consistent, like they referenced the General Grievous massacre on Dathomir, which happened in the Clone Wars. Like, all these elements directly tie into the story from other Star Wars media, which, you know, as a Star Wars fan, I appreciate it. I'm like, oh, that's cool that they referenced that, or that actually plays into the narrative of the game. But once again, even if you aren't like super well versed in Star Wars or anything, you don't know all these little Easter eggs and things, it's still an enjoyable game to play. It's a good story, it's an enjoyable game, the characters are investing, and it's just really awesome. Like I said, I've only really played the Lego games, that's including the Lego Star Wars games, but like I know there's some out there like The Force Unleashed, and I don't know, I heard Battlefront 2 was okay. I think that one's canon because they referenced it in The Mandalorian or something. So I don't know. I don't really have a ton of interest in playing all these. I got this game as a gift and I played through it, and it's just a really, really enjoyable game, and I still play it now. And like I said, it's one of those games that once you complete the main narrative, get all the collectibles and everything, there's still little things you can find out about it. I didn't even know there was a battle arena option until I went into one of the meditation centers and found out that there was this whole other area of the game that I had no idea existed. And it's just, there's so like much versatility in the game, and it's a game that is like constantly enjoyable to play, and that it is like you will continue to find out little things you didn't know about that you can play, and it's just like it never loses its entertainment value to me. And it's just, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the game. At first, I was like, I don't know if I like it. I played through the first main section of the game on Braca at the beginning of the game, and I was like, I don't know if I'm into this. So then I went back and played some Lego games, and I went back to it, and then I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty fun. And then I got into it, and it's just, really solid. I think it's one of the best Star Wars stories recently told. It follows some conventions, but it's still a good story. And the way that it concludes, I felt was actually very interesting and was like not what you'd expect. It kind of subverts your expectations, but in that good way where you're glad that the characters made the decision that they did. And yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I'm hoping that they make a sequel. Maybe they bring Cal Kestis into canon in like one of the shows or movies. I have a theory about Cal possibly showing up in the Bad Batch, but we'll just have to wait and see about that. I think that's definitely a possibility, but we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed Jedi Fallen Order. I'd recommend, if you have the money or whatever and the time, that you play through it, because it's just awesome. It's an awesome game. It's an awesome story. If you love Star Wars, I think you're going to like it. If you like games, you like Star Wars, all that stuff, you're going to like this game like I did. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Jedi Fallen Order. You guys please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below if you've played Jedi Fallen Order, and just, once again, just please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.